So we're here in Nashville, Tennessee at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, and we just had a breaking news, very exciting press conference that happened in the Israel 365 War Room in collaboration with the Israel Guys, also in collaboration with the Israel Allies Foundation, a biblical Heartland Resolution that calls for media and individuals all over the world to stop using the terminology West Bank or occupied territories and instead begin using the term Judea and Samaria or Israel's biblical heartland. You know, that's our heart and our mission. And it was so exciting because the president of NRB, along with collaboration from the prime minister's spokesman from Israel, were all a part of this event. Nothing like this has ever happened before. It's another stepping stone on the path forward. We want to share all the footage from the press conference, including the full resolution with you right now.
I'm Rabbi Pesach Wulicki, and with me is Joshua Reinstein, president of the Israel Allies Foundation and director of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, Troy Miller, president of the NRB, and Tal Heinrich, spokesman for the Prime Minister of Israel's office. And we're here at the NRB Convention in Nashville, Tennessee, with the announcement of a very important resolution. To introduce the resolution, I'll turn the floor over to Joshua Reinstein.
Thank you so much, Pesach, for that warm introduction. I want to thank Israel 365, Rabbi Tuli Weiss and the whole team for putting this event together. A special thanks to the president of the NRB, Troy Miller, who's graciously helped us to facilitate all this. And we really thank you for all that you've done for Israel and the Jewish people. And of course, we're honored to be here with the spokesperson from the Prime Minister's office. Tal, thank you for being with us. Today is a very important day. We have a historic resolution that I'd like to talk about. Of course, the obvious place to unveil the resolution is the NRB, the National Religious Broadcasting Convention. It is Christians, not countries, that stand with Israel today, and the Christians are bringing their governments with them. Without Christian support, there'd be no embassies in Jerusalem. Without Christian support, we wouldn't have anti-BDS legislation in 37 states across the United States and many more countries around the world. We wouldn't even have observer status at the African Union without Christian support. So today, faith-based diplomacy, when people take their biblical support and turn into real political action, it's the most important weapon that Israel has in its diplomatic arsenal. It's the reason we have so many diplomatic successes around the world. So we thank our Christian brothers and sisters who are here today with us, to all the people at the NRB that are with us to talk about this important resolution. People need to understand that language matters. And the language in Israel has been taken over and being held hostage. Things that mean beautiful things have turned into terrible things. For example, when you talk about peace in Israel, it means giving up land. When you talk about a two-state solution, it doesn't mean creating a Jewish state and a Palestinian state. It just means creating a Palestinian state, which we know leads to more war and terror. And one of the most egregious examples of this is calling Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland of Israel, the West Bank. This happened after the occupation of Jordan in 1948 until 1967. They renamed the area of Judea and Samaria the West Bank, and the world today calls Judea and Samaria the West Bank. But of course, people who read their Bible know that's not true, that Judea and Samaria has been the land and the heartland of Israel for thousands of years, and that the Jewish people have always been in the land of Israel since the time of Joshua. And so there's always been a people in this place of Judea and Samaria. And today these people are being demonized. 500,000 people Jewish people live in Judea and Samaria. And they are not only being demonized by anti-Israel forces, but even some of our friends. The Biden administration is trying to sanction some of the people living in Judea and Samaria, the Jewish people, but not any of the Palestinian or Muslim people who are attacking these people and doing terrorist attacks on a daily basis, including today. So we have to be very clear when we use language and when we speak about what's happening in the Middle East. We saw during the Trump administration that clarity brings peace. When U.S. decided to move its embassy to Jerusalem and declare Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel, everyone thought that would lead to war because it wasn't politically correct, but it was biblically correct. And because of that, we had incredible peace that led to the Abraham Accords, peace with our neighbors. And so once we make this decision to talk about the truth, to talk about what's really happening in the Middle East, then peace can follow. And so we've crafted this resolution together with Israel 365 and the Israel Allies Foundation, and we're excited to have it endorsed by the NRB today, and I'm going to read it out loud. It's called Biblical Heartland Resolution. Whereas the Bible refers to the area located west of the Jordan River as Judea and Samaria, or in Hebrew, Yehuda v'Shomron, with both names tied to the ancient biblical kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Samaria. Whereas Judea and Samaria has been renamed the West Bank by Jordan following the Jordanian capture of the region in the 1948 War of Independence and its subsequent occupation until 1967. Whereas the West Bank is merely a geographical term applicable to the country of Jordan and has no historic or legal bearing. Whereas the West Bank is located on the eastern side of Israel. Whereas Judea and Samaria are the biblical heartland of Israel, which includes sites such as Hebron, Bethel, Shiloh, and Shem, along with many other places with rich biblical heritage. Whereas the scripture foretells both the exile and the return of the Jewish people to Judea and Samaria in Jeremiah 31, whereas the New Testament speaks of the region of Judea and tells of Jesus being born in Bethlehem in Judah, Matthew 2, and references the prophet Micah, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel, Micah 5, 2, and 4. Whereas Jesus passed through Samaria when he returned from Jerusalem to the Galilee, and the region of Samaria and his people are referenced in Jesus' talk with the Samaritan woman and at the well and the parable of the Good Samaritan. Whereas in Acts 1, Jesus commissioned his disciples, calling the biblical heartland by its historic and biblical name, saying, "And you will be my witness in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth." Acts 1:8. Whereas Judea and Samaria is critical to Israel's security, as the Samaritan mountains overlook the Israeli coast, including Tel Aviv, and other major population centers, including Israel's international airport. Whereas Judea and Samaria provides strategic depth without which Israel is only 9 miles wide in some area. Whereas the presence of the Jewish people in Judea and Samaria in modern times is a blessing to the Palestinians living there, as Israeli investment in jobs provides economic opportunity for their Palestinian neighbors. Whereas the Jewish and Palestinian inhabitants of Judea and Samaria, who work side by side, are living out peace every day and choosing to be peacemakers. Whereas throughout history, enemies of the Jewish people have attempted to erase the Jewish connection to the land by renaming it, whether it be the Romans' attempt to sever Jewish ties to the entire land of Israel by renaming it Philistina, or its Jordan renaming Judea and Samaria the West Bank, or modern governments calling it the occupied Palestinian territories. The truth to the region's identity lies in biblical roots, whereas referring to Judea and Samaria as the West Bank is an attempt to replace the region's Jewish identity, and whereas the government of the State of Israel refers to the region as Judea and Samaria, therefore be it resolved that the NRB opposes the use of erroneous terms West Bank to describe the biblical heartland of Israel and calls on its members to refer to the region by its historic name of Judea and Samaria. Thank you.
I'd now like to call upon the president of the NRB, Troy Miller. Troy, 70% of all the biblical places in stories in the Bible are in Judea and Samaria. And furthermore, West Bank, it sends the message that there's some little strip, it's like the bank of the Jordan River, but we know it's a much wider swath of land. And I want to commend you for the NRB taking the lead in changing the narrative. If all of the constituents of the NRB could start using the proper terminology, calling this land what it is, Judea and Samaria, reinforcing the Jewish heritage of that land, we will be standing on God's truth. So thank you so much, Troy Miller, president of the NRB.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me here today. You know, Christians know and read our Bible. We open up our maps in the back and we look at the land that was given to Israel and that God promised to Israel and gave to Israel, and we realize that Judea and Samaria are part of that land. And I think you're right. Words matter today, and the truth matters as well. And it is time for us to step up and be honest about the truth of what's happening in Israel and the definition of this land. And so we are privileged, and we are honored to stand beside you and to endorse this resolution. And I think Christians across the country will look at this resolution and endorse it as well.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to call upon Tal Heinrich, who is a spokesperson for the Prime Minister's Office of the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. Tal, right now, so many of the world leaders are pressuring Israel to do things that would undermine our national security, such as this unilateral move to create a Palestinian state. Share with us the Prime Minister's opinion, the Prime Minister's point of view, and the unanimous opinion of the Israeli government on these matters.
First, it's my pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for demonstrating moral clarity, for showing us support. It's been an incredible experience to walk down these halls here at the NRB, and really, it's heartwarming. And you see, yes, it's true. There's pressure out there. There's also a lot of support. But it's important to mention that we are not fighting this war for support, although it's a great thing to have on your side when you're fighting a most justified war, nor the lack of support is something that will stop us. We're fighting because we faced, and we're still facing an existential genocidal threat called Hamas. And we've been in this tough neighborhood for more than 3,000 years. You guys here know the connection. You keep reminding the world of it, and it's important. And we know what it takes to survive in such a neighborhood. And right now, we say that Hamas must be gone. We've said it many times that we oppose any kind of one-sided recognition of a Palestinian state because this is counterproductive. It will not bring peace. It will do exactly the opposite. It will be an enormous prize for the perpetrators of the October 7th massacre and the atrocities. And we know that appeasing terrorists never panned out well throughout history. That's a fact. That's a fact. And the Prime Minister has repeatedly said that any kind of settlement between Israel and its Palestinian neighbors is something that should be negotiated in direct negotiations without any preconditions. We've said it before, October 7th, we said it now. And anyone out there who truly cares about peace, cares about security of Israel, and cares about Palestinian civilians would have called for the surrender of Hamas, would have said, lay down your arms now, surrender, and bring the hostages back home. The fact that it's so easy for us here to say it, yet seems to be difficult. It's institutions like the United Nations, for example, that is outrageous. That is what every leader of a nation in the free world, civilized world, should have been calling for.
I would add to what you're saying that the United States is a signatory to the Oslo Accords. And according to the Oslo Accords, written in the Oslo Accords, any settlement must be bilaterally negotiated. And therefore, these calls by the current U.S. administration for unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state are actually a material breach of the Oslo Accords by the U.S. government if they were to go forward. Should we take questions from those who are here? If anyone has any questions for our guests.
When you're talking about this in TV, radio, media, we don't want to use the word West Bank. So you're going to say, we should say Judea, Samaria, or Heartland. Are there any other ways to describe it? And then if we do it that way, should we still say formerly known as
this way. You want to take it?
as the West Bank?
Okay,
What's the best way to describe it?
Well, I would say, look, that's a question of how you educate your audience. And obviously, in the early going, before we normalize the term, it might be important to say otherwise known as or erroneously called, something like that. I think there are practical ways to overcome that. But this is part of the job of media, especially faith-based media must take responsibility and not follow the narratives and the terminology that are foisted upon us by those who are obscuring the truth. So we need to figure out how exactly to present the verbiage, but this is of great necessity to reclaim the narrative of truth. Josh, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, please. There needs to be a real education campaign. What's happening is that Christian supporters of Israel, people who know their Bible, they don't understand that the West Bank and Judea and Samaria are the same place. If you ask someone who's a Christian, do you support the creation of a Palestinian state or a two-state solution, they might say even yes, because they don't know where the state would be. They don't realize it's going to be in Judea and Samaria. That's where they're talking about making a state. So people who know their Bible understand the history of Israel. They understand the geography of Israel, and they understand the biblical heartland of Israel more than anyone else. But they don't understand it when you put it in these confusing modern texts. And that's why it's so powerful what the other side is doing by trying to steal the language. They're trying to say West Bank to confuse people and be like, oh, no, we're not talking about something you care about. We're talking about the West Bank. And the West Bank means nothing to anyone because that's not a real place. It's a fictitious area. So it's very important to educate. I have a TV show, Israel Now News, and we use Judea and Samaria, but sometimes we have to say what people are calling the West Bank is actually Judea and Samaria, and people are shocked. So I think it's very important to bring that point out.
And I'll just expand on that because I do think it's very important, and words matter, and how we control the conversation and control the language around this. And it is part of a bigger effort for education. A number of Christians that I walk around, especially younger Christians today, have heard this propaganda, and they've really been fed this. They don't understand, as Josh said, that the West Bank is within the boundaries, the biblical boundaries of Israel. And so when we change the language to talk about Judea and Samaria and talk about, as you said, all of the Bible references in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and also the history of the Jewish people. A lot of people know their Bibles. They know what I would call the ancient history of the Jewish people leading up to the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. But after that, they kind of lose this whole idea of what happened to Israel, that all of a sudden there were no Israeli people there were no Jewish people in what we think of, what we know of as Israel. That's not true. The fact is that the Jewish people have always been in Israel. God's always held a remnant there in Israel. They didn't just magically happen in 1948. The Jewish people have always been in the land God promised to them. And that's the kind of education and messaging that we need to get out across the broader Christian community and the media as well.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. Thank you to all of you who are here. We will be making the full text of this resolution available. We're going to be pushing this out, and we ask everyone here and everyone who was watching this, we need to win this battle. We are in an information war, and those who stand on God's truth must fight side by side. We will win this information war, but we need everyone's cooperation to push this out. No longer will we refer to Judea and Samaria by this fictitious name. It is Judea and Samaria. Jews are called Jews because we are from Judea. And we will win this, and we will make this, again, we'll make this resolution available to everyone. And thank you all for coming, and thank you all for standing on the truth of God's word.